All right. I have 8 o'clock, and I see that Senator Walker and Representative Lauer are both with us. Welcome to each and every one of you for joining us on today's Third House session.
Good morning.
Good morning. Let's see. We
Good
definitely
morning. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can. Sure can. Welcome, Representative Lauer. This is our final Third House session of the long session, which is kind of surprising. We're really grateful that Natural Choices for Healthful Living has been our sponsor this year. Just a note that I think we've muted all of you as you've arrived, and we'll ask that you just go ahead and keep yourselves on mute because it eliminates a lot of the background noise that you sometimes get when you have a lot of people on Zoom. We've also deactivated the chat feature for the call. We do have a number of submitted questions, so we will be interspersing the submitted questions with questions from our ABC Stewart students. And I haven't noticed if they're on the call. Hopefully they have made it. Teacher Jerry Mullen is our coordinator there, and that's just a kind of a long-standing tradition here at Third House Sessions to have the students from ABC Stewart come with their questions to submit. And time permitting, at the end of the call, we'll have you raise your hand and we'll call on you to share your questions if we're able. So we have with us today Senator Greg Walker and Representative Lauer, and we're going to start with some remarks from them. Just a reminder, this is a long session. It's the session in which the budget, the biennial budget, is passed. And so I'll ask Senator Walker if you'll share with us both sort of what are some of the high level things you're paying attention to at this late stage, and how do you see the budget shaping up for the state?
Thank you, Cindy. The long session's when we pass the budget, and many have pointed out that's a constitutional duty. That doesn't mean everyone has to vote for the budget. We just have to get a majority to vote for the budget. So guys like myself sit there and ponder, is there enough in there in this budget I like to vote for it or not? I've told a few people this year I've voted no on the budget before, and I can do it again if I feel like I need to. So I've got a lot of things I am watching. From a high level, every session has had its own feel, but this one has been challenging from the standpoint of all of the restrictions on in-person contact that we've administered. I think particularly in our committee settings has been detrimental. I still try on occasion to just once in a great while walk around the hallways and pick up some conversations on the fly, so to speak. And it's always been illuminating how many things I can learn by just striking up conversations with people I see. It's like, I've been thinking about asking this question, or someone comes up with a point, and it can be another legislator, it could be a member of the House, it could be a lobbyist, it can be another state official. And I've been able to pick up some interesting things this year doing that, but not to the degree I've been able to in the past. So we are working towards finalizing the budget, but in order to do so, we still also are waiting on one more Global Insights forecast due out in a week, I think. I think April 14th is the date, but it's about 2 weeks before we end to see where we stand on the budget. We've had some preliminary discussions about it, and Ryan Mishler chairs appropriations, and he's sort of the point man for all questions budgetary. And he did say the other day to all of us, we're very tight. When we start talking about the extra or the add-ons and things we'd like to do, We just don't have a lot of room. Basically, everything has already been allocated that we have money for. There were even some things that came over from the House version that I think needed attention, and I think those are being accounted for. The cigarette tax increase has not been popularly received, but I don't think it's come down to a final vote yet on whether or not that remains in the budget. I think that was 50 cents a pack increase.
And Senator Walker,
There
your
are no
bandwidth,
items that
we're getting a note that your bandwidth
I'm
is
sorry,
low. We're getting
my band
your bandwidth
bandwidth.
low, so I'm hearing most of what you are saying, but every now and then it gets a little stuttery.
Yeah, I don't know how to increase my bandwidth,
Just letting you
but
know.
okay. I guess another item that's still up in the air. I mean, things can change, but it doesn't seem as though 1005 is going to get a hearing as a standalone topic on the education savings accounts, or education scholarship accounts, whatever you want to call them. And I think largely that discussion is going to end up in the budget as well. But tomorrow, Tax and Fiscal does get to hear a bill I've been watching most of the session with a lot of interest, being the approval of solar and wind projects on the county level for commercial solar and wind installations. And the bill's been heavily modified. It's now grown to over 100 pages. So I'm still working through what that bill means for locals. There's been some encouraging moves as far as maintaining local control over the projects, but I'm not certain as I read the bill that I'm still comfortable with essentially creating a drop dead date of June 30th or before July 1 for counties to adopt commercial energy installation standards. Otherwise, the default will be the state standard that was already in the bill, drafted in the bill. There are some tax increases that are meant to incentivize locals to adopt the state standards. But the way I read it today, that's going to be your only choice to adopt the state standards if you don't have your own regulatory climate on the local ordinances or through the local zoning in place in less than 3 months. So it's kind of a rush to a deadline. I'm not sure that I understand why there is such a hurried need to do this. So those are two big pieces I'm looking at right now. Still is the school funding regarding private funding, and then the solar and wind bill, I think is a big topic. And it's funny. There's been some conversation about it, but not to the degree I think the bill deserves.
Thank you. Representative Lauer, would you also give us kind of your high-level overview and what you're paying attention to?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay, Cindy?
Yes.
Yes, my earbuds went out just at the last minute, so I'm on my computer. Things are shaping up. We're working actually very closely with our Senate partners. Maybe in years past, things weren't as so closely aligned, but especially during this unusual year with COVID, we've really had to and purposely worked closely with the Senate throughout the session. Sometimes we wait till the middle of the session. So there's a lot of moving pieces right now. The Senate obviously is deliberating over House bills we sent them, and we're having committees and deliberating over Senate bills coming over. Some of the ones I wanted to mention that maybe didn't get mentioned so much in the previous meetings, but one of our House bills, 1009, is working to help those that are disadvantaged that have that are taking TANF funds. Those are those are funds for people that are struggling. And Bill 1009 keeps the individual from falling off a cliff, to keep them from denying raises or denying or not getting a job because they'll lose their public benefits. That's a really important bill. I think it hasn't gotten a lot of attention, but I'm hoping that that's doing well over in the Senate. I'm a co-author and a co-sponsor on House Bill 1515, and also a sister bill in the Senate 232. What this does is adding exposure risk diseases to on duty or death benefits for on duty first responders, and we're including SARS related illnesses. Basically, COVID is included in that. So we're making that retroactive as well. So if you're a first responder and tragically passed in the line of duty due to a SARS-related illness or COVID, you will receive your in the line of duty death benefits. That's very important. Some of the other things going on, we've got the budget obviously is being discussed, and that's going back and forth as well. I know the Senate's got that in hand right now, and so we're paying close attention to see how that's going to be changed, and there'll be continued deliberations as it moves through the Senate, but also I'm expecting that there'll be deliberations again and a public setting when it comes back over to the House. So we'll see how that comes together. And another bill I wanted to mention is the civics bill. There's been a little bit of news about that, just promoting that. I think the fact that it passed almost unanimously in the House, and the idea is to bring back civics education, learning more about our government and our system, of our Constitution, and how our system works. Bringing that to our middle schoolers, and I think that's a very positive and good thing. So I'm looking forward and hoping that that does well over in the Senate as well. I think that's doing okay. But today I'm very interested to hear what my constituents have to say, and looking forward to questions.
All right, let's get to some of those questions. And I think I'd like to start with the discussion about the education savings account bill, because Senator Walker, you said something about this bill won't get a hearing, but you think it will end up in the budget. So we want to touch on that. And the question reads like this: the Education Savings Account Bill, HB 1005 and Senate Bill 412, include only weak may provisions to protect against fraud in the program. A person misusing public ESA funds, so education savings account funds, may be reported by law enforcement. And then it says in Chapter 4, it includes a financial incentive of up to $2,000 per year in public funds that an ESA recipient can save for college. So I think the question is, has it been vetted completely, and is this wise to spend taxpayer dollars on a new unproven program? So really kind of two questions there about the fraud, and also what's going on with not getting a hearing and also ending up in the budget.
Well, the chairman of education said there's been enough conversation on this topic that we can, because these are largely funding questions, The ESA is the new model. And I mean, there are two pieces here. There's both the voucher expansion and then the ESA model. The concern about the $26,000 over the course of 13 years times 2,000 savings of our carryover, I don't believe that's in the language. I've asked specific questions on that one about, does someone get a chance to bank money, continue rolling? I don't think that's the case, but I do think, though, in fact, I had this confirmed for me. I had some questions about how the ESA dollars work in regards to a student with disabilities who may already be in a private school setting and utilizing the public school for certain services for a disabled child. And there are both Title I dollars from the federal level, which go on a formula based on geography and zip codes that go to help offset those costs. But then there's also a state portion. I said, what if a parent actually says, well, you know, I now have up to $9,000 to spend on disability education for my child. And there's some services over here a private provider could do that the public school cannot. And so I'd like to explore those. So they contract with that private provider, spend that money, and they say, oh, but I still want to use the services I still got back at the public school. And my question is, under Title I, the federal government has a mandate that all public schools are going to educate kids with disabilities, with no mention to an ESA because they're not part of the landscape at this time. And the answer I finally got back was, well, yeah, I think a parent could probably do that once. And after that, we could probably catch it and prevent that from being an ongoing situation. And I think as a result, I haven't seen any written out language, but in talking to those directing that bill, that will probably see some sort of waiver on the part of the parent that if they choose to take those disability dollars. So I think it's helped close that loophole. But I have to agree with whoever generated the question, is that I'm not seeing that I know the vendors need to be approved and vetted before they're added to the vendor list. You know, I'd like to think, actually, when I asked this question, it's interesting. The response I got was, well, as a parent, I would never do that. You know, dedicate money one source, then go ahead and use the resource someplace else. And I said, well, I wouldn't either, but that's not the question. People can find ways to circumvent the intention of law and the intention of well-intended programs. And there's certainly well intentions here, but I'm still not convinced that there's a lot of utility. I think especially for the disabled child, often those needs are so difficult to meet and very expensive. I don't know that a private source is going to even be able to contract for a lot of these things. And then the other provisions in that language are for students of military families and those of foster families. And I understand there could be some unique challenges in those families as well, but I'm not getting the nexus as to why those would be the qualifying families as opposed to others. I think there's also a lot of conversation yet about the income threshold on the vouchers. It looks like the House version has maybe about a 40% to 50%, depending on who signs up, overall increase in voucher and ESA spending altogether. And I think we've got maybe a 2 to 1.5% over the next biennium increase in public schools. There, I'll just go into it briefly for those that can appreciate it. They can. If you can't, you can't. That's okay. But I look at what I call, or what economists call, the law of diminishing returns. I've said this before. My wife and I homeschool 4 children. I'm a pro-choice educator person. There's no questioning that. I don't have to have credentials to say that, but there's no question to it. But there's a law of diminishing returns when you have as many options as already are in Indiana. Additional funds and additional options do not necessarily create more beneficial outcomes, because there's only a certain percentage of people that even would find advantage to taking advantage of some of these options. And again, these options are available. I don't think a family of four at $145,000 is necessarily going to struggle when it comes to finding ways to pay for private education or alternatives to the public system. And we had 4 kids. I think that's $195,000 under the plan. And I think we're well off, but we never made that kind of money or even close the whole time we were raising 4 children. And so I'll say, I think the law of diminishing returns is really impacted my view on this bill.
Okay, thank you, Senator Walker. I want to move over to Representative Lauer, who's our resident expert, as a co-author of House Bill 1005. Do you want to comment on this? And can you specifically talk about, can the ESA be used for college expenses?
Mute. Yes. So the discussion along the lines of banking the money. First of all, the ESAs are targeted towards families and children that have specific challenges. So kids with disabilities, active duty military, foster children, and what we're seeing is that they have needs for more flexibility in their education. Now, we're not going to see all of these kids across the state flood into private choice. I mean, this is all about giving the flexibility and choice for kids and parents to choose the schools that are most appropriate to them. ESAs, education savings accounts, have been implemented in a number of states. We wouldn't be the first. And they are a way for people in very specific circumstances to get a unique and fitting education for them. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the talk about the extremes, right? Well, the numbers for the House bill had a family of 4, about 140,000 was the max, right? Well, on the other end of the scale, right now, if you're a family of 4 making $50,000 to $70,000 a year, you don't have full access to school choice. So part of this is expanding the eligibility into the middle class. The notion that every year you could bank thousands and thousands of dollars all the way to $26,000, which would be the absolute maximum if everything was banked every single year. And the facts about ESAs in other states, for instance, don't bear out that that's going to be a possibility. But I understand that by the letter of the law, you could engineer that scenario. So when it comes down to it, your question was, would it be ability for a disabled student to have some money left over when they get into a college age, or maybe they're a junior and they're graduating early? The answer is yes. Some of those funds could be used for Indiana College, and I know that the Senate's looking at this. And one of the other things that was mentioned, and that what I've heard from some people that have opinions on this bill, both for and against, but one of the comments is that it's not controlled, or there'll be rampant fraud. The ESAs as a mechanism to promote school choice, especially among the disabled community. What we have in Indiana is a structure through the treasurer's office, and we currently have programs like the 529 scholarship accounts. Those are maintained and administered by the Secretary of the Treasurer, and have been doing very well. That is the same type of regulatory structure for these ESA accounts. And also, the structure is set up so that each of the approved expenses have to be approved ahead of time and have to go through the process and have to go through a vetting process through the treasurer's office. And I think that there are a lot of safeguards there to make sure that the monies that are allocated for our disabled, for our foster and active military families, that I think there's very little ability to circumvent the system, especially when you can only spend those choice dollars on approved programs and approved tuition. And I think that that's going to be a very large guardrail to make sure that all of these funds go to where they're intended to go, and that's to educate these kids. There'll be full auditing after the fact, and there's, again, full vetting of the vendors involved as well. So I'm, I'm listening very much to the discussions going on. We're interested to see what the Senate's view is, and I respect that view very much. And looking forward to seeing how it comes out. You mentioned earlier that the Senate has decided to put 1005 into their budget bill, and we've been discussing with them on making sure that we have more public opportunities, and the budget bill obviously is a public opportunity to talk about that. But I fully expect that when it comes back over to the House, that there'll be at least one more public hearing on these topics.
Great, thank you. Okay, it's almost 8:30 and we have several questions, and I'd like to turn our attention to the students from ABC Stewart if they are ready. I'm going to spotlight them. We are ready for our first question, and I'll ask our students to unmute, speak up, tell us who you are, what grade you're in, give us your question, and I'll ask our legislators to remember we have only a certain number of minutes left to respond. So if you can keep your responses concise, we'll get through lots of questions. Thank you. ABC Stewart, go ahead.
Hello, good morning, Senator Walker and Representative Lauer. My name is Audrey Conway and I'm a graduate at ABC Stewart Montessori School. And I have a question for Senator Walker. Senator Walker, how are you continuously working towards reducing opioid addiction use in Indiana?
Well, that's a good question, Audrey. I think the pandemic has actually shown how challenged many people are these days, and turning to drugs is not a solution to challenging times. But I think probably one of the biggest moves this year is to focus on those who are incarcerated and finding more resources to help them with behavioral programming. Unfortunately, our county jails and our penitentiaries have become the de facto drug treatment centers in the state. And I say unfortunate because I do believe that criminality is part of trying to deal with the problem of illicit drug use, but I don't think it's the only answer. I do think you need to treat the physiological damage and the mental damage that goes with drug addiction and drug abuse. You know, I think that's going to be one of the more effective ways is to continue to focus on those who are caught up in it in the penal system and try to find more ways to get them so that when they do receive their freedom, they're not returning to their old friends and their old habits in regards to these kind of addictions.
Thank you. I'm going to jump in here and add a question from our submitted list, and we'll come back to you students, okay? We'll be right back with you. So here's another question about public school funding. And I'm going to start with Representative Lauer. Public school districts make up nearly 92% of students in Indiana. In the proposed budget, HB 1001, about 72% of the increase over the biennium goes to public school districts. HB 1001 redirects $153 million in funds for public districts to new programs that have been added over the past 2 decades, like charter schools, private school vouchers, and now these ESAs, which we've talked about. Would you support changes to the budget that allocates K-12 funding increases based on student enrollment percentages that would allocate $153 million more in funding for public school corporations over the biennium? And you're on mute. There you go.
Yes, good question. I do have a little bit of, I don't quite understand all of that question because first of all, in Indiana, we fund students, we fund families, and the local property taxes, there's some federal money there that fund our public schools, but our state tuition is one of the biggest sources of funding for our public schools as well. So when you're talking about the total funding per student in public schools, traditional public schools, it's somewhere in the $10,000, $11,000 average per student. When you're talking about charter schools, those are public schools. However, they don't receive any property tax dollars, so they don't receive as much in terms of funding sources. They receive from some federal money. Private schools do not receive property tax money or probably not much federal funds as well, and are solely there from the tuition of their students. However, because we fund students in Indiana, if you qualify for under the school choice programs, then there is some funding there through the school vouchers for the school of your choice. In terms of increases, you know, the percent increases, when you're talking about biennium 3.5% increase or so for traditional public schools, when you're looking at a budget of $17 billion, 3% is quite a bit of money. So we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars of new money for our K through 12 public schools, and I support that. I think our budget is very strong for education. Half of our entire budget, so over 50% of all the money that Indiana takes in that is allocated goes to K through 12 public education. And that's a good thing. Now, in terms of this particular budget, we are increasing the school choice voucher program as well. So just for reference, the school choice voucher program is around $250 million a year, where we have our traditional public education is in the in the ballpark of about $17 billion over the biennium. So raising the percentage, it's not always an apples to apples. We, compared to the entire budget, we spend a very small amount on school choice, and we expend half of the budget on education, and that's good. I'm a strong supporter of both our public schools and our ability for parents and students to choose, have the ability to choose what school and what best options, what are the best options for them in education. So the percentages are always good to look at, but when you're talking about a multi-billion-dollar budget, a 3.5% increase is a very healthy increase, and will translate to $2.5 million new dollars for BCSC, for instance, here in Bartholomew County, going from about a $77 million budget to an $80 million budget. And that's going to allow for our public schools to have flexibility, to hopefully pay teachers more, to be able to use a lot of federal dollars coming down, $2 billion available that are coming down for our schools as well. And, I think we have a good path forward to really look at our budgets across the state. Our schools, I think a lot has gone on this past year, and there are more expenses on some things and there's less expenses on other things. And I think it's a good opportunity to find where you are across the state in your school budgets and try to do what's best for your community. The reality is that our public schools will be getting a healthy increase, and also the school choice program will be getting an increase as well.
Thank you. Senator Walker, you spoke a moment ago about being a pro-choice legislator, but also you mentioned there's a law of diminishing returns. Do you want to add anything to Ryan's answer or the previous question? How would you respond?
Well, Cindy, I think that question sort of underlines some of the facts that have led to my conclusion. So I have to agree with the sentiment of the question, that I've got my concerns there. When we talk about trying to grow Indiana, site selectors and realtors don't talk about the voucher programs, and they talk about the schools. And they're usually referring to the public schools. I'm concerned that Indiana on a national scale has fallen from something like 22nd in the nation in public school funding in 2004 to somewhere around 39th, I think it was now by 2019 measure, or maybe 2020. And that kind of national recognition or lack of recognition maybe has me concerned about our ability to grow and attract the kind of business climate that people, you can live anywhere and work anywhere these days. And this forum is part of what we're talking about. But people still want to live where the schools are for their children. And I understand there's more tools there too. And sometimes we're forced to go that direction. But I still think in terms of Indiana's opportunity to set the course for the future, I think maybe we have hit that magic number. I don't know that we have, but I'm growing concerned that we have regarding the law of diminishing returns. And I think our focus needs to be on bolstering our public ed.
Thank you. I'm going to take us back to our students and ask them to share their next question. So ABC Stewart kids, who's our next question asker?
So, hi, I'm Ogden Crow. I'm a sixth grader from ABC Stewart School, and my question is for Representative Lauer. Our statewide mask mandate ends tomorrow. Do you still plan on wearing a mask?
Thanks for your question. I have a lot of, it's been it's been a difficult year for so many people, for students, having to navigate going to school. That having the ability to go to school is so important, and it's so important for the future of our state, for every kid in this state. And I will say, here in Indiana, even though a lot of the country was shut down, there are still states that haven't had kids in school for a year. There are businesses in other states that are still not open. Indiana has navigated through this, I think, very well. I give the governor a lot of credit for striking a good balance between public health and safety, and making sure that we don't need to come to an absolute standstill. Will I be wearing a mask? Yeah. There are plenty of opportunities. There are businesses that will continue to do that, and that's within their right. Our local communities might decide if there are spikes that go up to have local decisions on that. But as of tomorrow, I believe we're relaxing some of the state mandates, including the mask mandate. And I think what I've always said is that at this point, Hoosiers are smart. They know what to do. Businesses know how to protect their employees and their customers. The state has a big role to make sure that people know the facts and know some of the best practices to use and recommendations. And the state will continue to do that, to give guidance and work hand in hand with our state health and our local health departments, for example, in our hospitals. But I think I trust Hoosiers to know when's the right time to do what you feel is right to protect you and your family and others. And I think tomorrow is where it starts, where the state mandate expires, and some of the business capacity, I think, is expiring as well. And trusting Hoosiers to know what to do and how to keep you and your family as healthy and safe as possible. Good question.
Kids, we'll be back to you in just a minute. So I've got a question submitted by Thrive Alliance. According to census.gov, the Census Bureau won't be able to get current population counts for redistricting to the states until as late as September 30th. Do you think this will cause any constitutional problems for us in Indiana regarding timing? That's the first question. And second, will you support a final district map that reflects Indiana voters' overall preference for party candidates, and oppose any map that skews expected election results in favor of one party or the other? I'm going to direct that to Senator Walker, because I know this is a topic he's been hard at work on for several years.
Well, yeah, thank you, Cindy. The data expectation is end of September. So our first real deadline beyond the constitutional concerns would be getting districts established in time for candidates to file to run for office in 2022. We don't think about that too much, but if you are maybe on an existing borderline or maybe not, you may or may not have a district to run in, depending on where your house is, where your residence is. And so that's pretty critical that we give Hoosiers an opportunity to file as candidates. We will need for the governor to do us a favor and call us into special session under current law. At least that's under debate and another topic, but under current law, we'll need that favor in order to accomplish that. And so it's my expectation that we will be in session probably a week or maybe a week prior to the release of information, maybe 2 weeks, so that we can build the modeling and then plug the numbers when they're available, so to speak. And as far as drawing those district lines, there's no question, but what they'll be partisan, they always are. I don't think you can find a model yet that doesn't have some element of partisanship, even in those states that have tried to create and construct independent commissions to conduct this process. I think the data has shown that they can be as partisan or more partisan as states that don't. So it's a real challenge to get those in control to be fair-minded. I think Indiana has received national recognition for being one of the more fair-minded states in the past, and I hope we can continue to be there. But I'm disappointed that I think I found some working models to ensure that we would collect the data to prove statistically whether we were being biased or not in the creation of districts, and I've yet to get my caucus to adopt those ideas. And the courts keep signaling they want to stay out of the mess. They want to stay out of the politics of redistricting. And I don't expect this court to change that course anytime in the near future, Supreme Court. So I think we're stuck with the lay of the land as we have it. And I think it's important work. One thing I will say about this upcoming redistricting is that I think now with the sophistication of computer modeling and so on, I anticipate a lot of entities diving deeply into the data and coming up with alternative models. And in doing so, I hope that they can demonstrate that there are some valid reasons to consider alternatives to what the state proposes. And I hope that we can listen and accommodate a lot of those ideas in what we're doing.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I'm going to go back to our kids at ABC Stewart and listen for the next question. Can you unmute and tell us your name and what grade you're in?
Hello, my name is Graham Pumphrey and I'm a sixth grader at ABC Stewart. Senator Walker, my question is for you. There have been many issues with mass shootings in the past. Students in schools have the fear of mass shootings every day. What are you and other senators doing to protect schools from mass shootings?
Well, the state has, over the last 4 years, invested a lot of dollars into what we call hardening schools. That is creating single points of access, doors that are more durable, just making the facility itself more resistant to outside attack. There's only so much that can be done in terms of predicting unpredictable behavior, right? We never know but what Senator Walker will be the next mass shooter. I mean, there's certain psychological profiles you can do. There's certain demographics you might consider, but when it comes right down to it, if someone engages in that kind of action, they probably lost all sense of reason and morality and judgment. And so who knows where that's and when that's going to happen. So I think it's very difficult to look at individuals and say, well, that's our target. That's our suspect or the next shooter that would do something like that. That's just heart wrenching. I think education and people being responsible is an important part of this. But I think the preparation comes mostly in, we funded hardening of the schools themselves and public safety officers and having them available as resources. They call them resource officers in the schools in order to respond to the, I'd like to call the unthinkable, but it's not, it happens. You know, in terms of matter of perspective, it's so important we do this, but we have a lot of other risks and lots of other challenges in life. You know, unfortunately, 10 times more children die in accidents related to school buses than in school shootings, 10 times more. So is school bus safety important too? You better believe it is, you know. Bus arms, when the stop arm comes out and people speed by the vehicle, we've had some horrific stories in our state. And why can't we deal with that? Because we're bound by law that we can only do certain things. And so these are important questions, but in terms of the risk and the potential of that happening, we got to think about people playing with their phones in a car instead of watching themselves as they drive around school children. You know, there's lots of things that need our attention, and this is certainly one of them. And I think we've done a lot to help address the risk and to help address the response when those things do happen.
Thank you. Do we have one more question from ABC Stewart, or are we done? One more. Let's go ahead and hear from you.
Hi, my name is Benjamin Lieber, and I'm a sixth grader at ABC Stewart. And my question is for Representative Lauer. Representative Lauer, with the more than $56.9 million in expected revenue with the sales tax, should the money go to the Small Business Restart Program?
Oh, well, we are very fortunate and very blessed to have a strong economy, and part of that it's not an accident. We in Indiana have been conservative with our budget and our finances, and our economy is doing very well, and so we're blessed to have some extra funds available. You mentioned the sales tax. There's certainly some increase in revenues coming from sales tax, coming from business taxes, coming from our working families' income taxes. Yes, we are investing in our businesses. There are, what I found talking to lots of people and businesses and communities, leaders in communities, that during this very difficult past year, there are too many businesses that especially in the service industry, from the restaurants to entertainment to hotels, that service type of industry have been hit so hard. But I hear also from other businesses and even some restaurants that have been doing very well. So we have legislation this session to help out those businesses that are struggling, that continue to struggle, and have additional grants and money available to help them and their employees through this time. And those are very targeted to businesses that need it. And we are very focused on that. We're very focused on a number of different mitigations to help us recover from the pandemic. And another one is lost learning. There's $150 million allocated for kids, for students who have fallen behind during the pandemic academically. And there's going to be a lot of opportunities this summer for getting additional learning and additional help to get you back up to learning where you're at grade level if you've fallen behind. So there are a number of things we're doing to mitigate the difficulties that we've had during the pandemic. And certainly some businesses have gotten hit very hard, and there's new funds available for them. And that's, a lot of those are just for this next year, one-time grants. And hopefully we'll be through the woods. And when we're talking 6 months from now, I hope and pray that this will be a thing of the past, the pandemic. And I'm very optimistic with the numbers that we're seeing very good improvement, and looking forward to a day where this is in the past. But right now, we have to focus on the people that are hurting, and that's a part of it. So thank you.
Thank you. And students, thank you for your outstanding questions. It's been a pleasure to have you with us today. Oh, is there one more? I'm gonna need to move on to one more submitted question for our final few minutes here. This is from Julie Lowe, Sierra Club leader. The House Environmental Affairs Committee will vote on Senate Bill 389 today. Wetland advocates have encouraged the committee and the bill's sponsor to consider policy options like ways to simplify wetland permitting, clarify exemptions, incentivize preservation of existing wetlands, and create a wetlands task force that can continue to evaluate how our wetland policy functions. And I believe this is for Representative Lauer. Would you support these policy options rather than completely stripping the protections from Indiana wetlands as SB 389 would do?
Yes, the 389 bill, I've been following it. It's been turned around and changed. The debate over that bill has been robust throughout. So I know that in the Senate side, there were some adjustments, but when it came over to the House, there's been a lot of negotiation, a lot of talk about, is that the right policy? And not everybody was supportive of that coming out of the Senate. I have some reservations with the Senate bill as it came over. I think there's a lot of value in our Class 3 wetlands, and that we need to, strike a balance to protect natural environment in Indiana in the Class 3 wetlands. When you start getting down into the Class 1 wetlands, the question is, are those wetlands, first of all, and what do you mean by that? And I'm very interested to see how that bill, I'm expecting that it will be, as the question added, that there would be a lot of changes in the committee, and then there would be more changes on the House floor should it get out of committee to the second reading. I'm looking forward to seeing what their focus is. If it's throwing out all the protections across the board, I think I'll have some real issues with that. If they get down into the crux of the issue, which I think is the issue, and that's Class 1 wetlands. Class 1 is in a lot of cases just when you have some farmland or some piece of land and you have a small amount of water that shows up. If you get a little bit of weeds that are indigenous to wetlands or some kind of insects or animals that show up, cattails have been mentioned a lot on that, then it comes under the Class 1 wetlands. The question is, how much are those really helping our environment in the current regulatory environment for Class 1 wetlands, and how much is that are just adding fees and increasing the price of affordable housing in Indiana as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that bill is adjusted. I think there's going to be a lot of changes to it. And I'll be looking forward to seeing where it lands on second reading. And then should it come up to a vote in the House, I'll consider that based on what I think, if it's good for Indiana, both environment and for business. So we'll see.
Thank you. Tough balance. It is 8:59. I think it's a good time to close our third House sessions for this session. I want to thank Representative Lauer and Senator Walker again for their continued participation with us in this new environment. I want to thank all of you who've come to listen, and thank you for your patience with us as we worked out the kinks in using this technology in this way. Just grateful for our servant leaders that are here to talk with us candidly and being accessible. Really appreciate your support. For those of you on the call, you want to keep following what's happening with the legislation. The Indiana General Assembly's website is really pretty easy to maneuver. It's iga.in.gov. I'd encourage you to keep tracking the bills that you care about, and that's the place to go to see where things stand currently. Any closing remarks from our elected officials before we go?
Cindy, I appreciate all your work and the chambers and putting this together. As much as I frown and grimace during the public meetings that we used to have, I still have to say I prefer the former to the latter. But I'm glad for this exchange, this chance to share some questions and address those. But I'd rather be yelled at in person than get a dirty email. So I hope we can get back to the live sessions really soon. Thank you for all you've done.
Thanks.
I want to echo that. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you for the Columbus Area Chamber of Commerce for years and years of doing these public service meetings. It's always been an honor and privilege for me to join, and it's really an honor to serve the people. I try to be as accessible as I possibly can. It doesn't matter if you vote one way or the other. I'm very interested in meeting and hearing from you, and this is another opportunity to be able to do that. I'm looking forward to the day where we can meet back again and get a room full of people and hear questions live and have interactions in a public setting in that sense. So hopefully next time we're together in this forum, that will be the case, and I look forward to that. In the meanwhile, happy Easter to everyone. I hope your weekend went well with your families, and I really appreciate the time, Cindy, that we have to talk with the public and for the questions today. And thank you, ABC, for joining us today. That was very special. Thank you.
That's special. All right, then we are adjourned. Thank you so much.